Hello all, welcome to the next session on PHP. So today we'll be discussing about how to use variables, then what are the various ways of by which you can use various operators in PHP, what are the various statements that PHP support and so on. So without much delay, let's move on to the first topic. Before that, I'll have to discuss about some characteristics of PHP that makes it so very familiar and easy to use. So these five characteristics are the five important characteristics of PHP is that firstly, it is about its simplicity. So just like I said before, any person who have a good knowledge in C programming language can easily master PHP language because most of the statements, most of the syntax are exactly similar to what we have in C programming language. Then the second one is about efficiency. So when you have a PHP code, you can see that it executes in no time and produces the best results. So it can be said to be a very efficient language. Then third one is about security. Since PHP supports encrypted data, you can have it to be one of the best secure language. That is why most of the very commonly used social networks are supported by PHP in the backend. Then it's about its flexibility. So PHP is actually an open source language. So you have the freedom to mold the program according to your personal wish or your application. So that is about the flexibility. And finally, it's about the familiarity. So just like I said before, most of the syntax or most of the statements, most of the variables being used are actually supported from the very basic programming language like C. So it's just similar to C programming. So any person who have at least a knowledge in C programming language can easily find out that this is very easy to learn PHP. So that is about the familiarity part of it. So these five characteristics makes PHP one of the most widely used server-side scripting language. So let's see how to use variables. So in my previous video, I had told you that we have variables which are not defined explicitly while we perform a PHP code. So what happens is when you assign a value to a particular variable in PHP, the value is analyzed and based on the value, the type of the variable is automatically defined. So that is one of the primary feature that PHP supports. You don't have to explicitly define the type of your variable. So all the below mentioned data types are supported by PHP. It supports strings, integers, floating point numbers, boolean, arrays, objects, null, and even a resource. So I'll be discussing in detail about all these data types. So about the object, array, null, and resource, when you have an array object, much like you use it in JavaScript or any other scripting language, you can set a data type to be an array. Then when it's about object, when you would be familiar with objects in Java programming, so you can actually create your own class and make use of those class in your PHP code here. So that is another important data type that PHP supports. It supports a data type which is of type object. Then it also supports a variable to be null, which means no type. You can have even a variable without any predefined type. Then next is about the resource. So this is actually not a type. It is about the reference that you can make from your PHP code to some previously existing files. Like you would have another function which is part of another PHP code. You can refer to that particular code just like you are referring to some internal resource. So that is about the resource part of it. So let's see all of these in detail. So about the string, this is already discussed in our previous video. You can create a string. You don't have to mention it is string X. You can just write $x is equal to whatever be the input string that should be written in either double quotes or singular quotes. Okay, so that is how you declare strings. So as you can see, we are not mentioning the keyword string here, but it is automatically assigned and defined to the variable. Then about About the next one is about the integers. So I don't have much to discuss about strings here because we have already discussed it in our previous video. Now about this integer part of it, you can have any non-decimal numbers ranging from these numbers, this range. You can have any numbers which are any non-decimal numbers falling in as your integer. So the only demand is that you should not have a decimal number assigned. If it is assigned as a decimal number, then it will be taken as a floating point variable. So if you have an integer, it should be a non-decimal number. And there are some rules for specifying integer. Firstly, it should be having at least one digit. Then it should not have any decimal point. You can have either negative or positive numbers based on the range supported by the range that we have given here. Then they can be specified in three formats. That you have decimal or 10 based integers, hexadecimal integers, or octal integers. I hope you will have already gone through these type of integers or numbers while you are go through the logic design and logic programming courses. Then so this is an example. You can see here that there is a variable x and it is assigned with a value 5985. Okay, so what happens, you are not saying it as integer or hexadecimal integer or octal integer. You are not mentioning anything. You are just giving the value which is 5985. And what happens, 5985 is understood as an integer and x is defined to be an integer variable. So there is a method called var dump which finds out what is the type of your variable. Okay, so when you say var dump and $x, it will return the data type along with its value. So the output would be int and 5985. Okay, so that is how you can find out the type of your variable. So this can apply for almost all the variables that you have in PHP. If you want to know what is the type of a string variable, all you have to do is that call the var dump function along with the variable as the argument. Then next is about the floating point numbers. Floating point numbers, as you just like we use for decimals, what you have to do is that you have to assign a variable with a floating point value and be assigned. It will be defined as a floating point variable. So again, when you go for the var dump method with the variable, you can find that it is of the type float and the value would be 10.365, which is the assigned value for that variable. So that is about how to declare floating point. Next, let's see what is a boolean. So just like we have boolean in C programming language, or just like we use boolean methods, you can set a variable to have either a true or a false as its value. So when it sees that it is a true, then it is understood that the variable is a boolean variable. So that is about the boolean data type. Next, it is about array. So when you have an array, all you have to do is that you will have to pass the values into the array. So when you pass the values, based on the type of the value being passed, the value or the type of the array is also defined. If you are passing numbers, then it will be an integer array. If you are passing string, then it will be a string array, so on. So you can see here that you have to use the array method while passing it. So this is your array, and it is saying that you are passing the numbers as, so passing the elements as array, and just like we do it in C programming, you will have to use double quotes and comma to separate each elements. Then when you perform var dump for this particular variable, you can see that it is set to be array. It has got three values. On the first position, it is string with a length of 5 and it is Volvo. Then at the position 1, it is a string with a length of 3, which is BMW. And at the position 2, you have a string having a length of 6, which is Toyota. So that is how you declare array. You can use var dump to find out what is the length of in each individual element, what is the type of the array, and so on. Next, it is about creating an object and making use of the object inside your PHP. So here you can see inside the code we have created a class. So I think you will be familiar with what is a class. A class is nothing but a collection of some properties and its behaviors. So you have to use the class keyword for declaring your class, and you are creating a class. So in the example, you are creating a class called car, and inside the class car you have a function which is again called car. Okay, and what is it doing? It is saying that the model of this car is VW. Okay, so it is assigning dollar. This stands for the variable which call that method or the function. Okay, this always refers to the current variable or the current object which invoked that variable. So here it will be referring to the current variable which is actually invoked that method. Okay, so now you are going to create the object. So how the object is being created? You have to give the object name, then along with the constructor. So what is the constructor here? It is the constructor is given as car, and you can see dollar this model, the model of the object Herbie has been set to VW. Now you're going to echo the model of Herbie, and you can see that the output is VW. So this is how you can use objects inside your PHP code. Okay, so this is one of the most attractive feature of PHP, that it is compatible with almost anything. Next is about having a PHP variable which is having a value null. Okay, so when it is having a value null, it cannot display anything. So when you call for a var dump, it will not produce an output because it is actually null. So when it is null, you cannot predict what is the type of the variable. So that is why it is not producing any output. Then about the resource, as I said before, if you have some external references, it can be to some external functions or some external resources. In that case, you can mention those resources as part of your PHP code, a reference to those resources as part of your PHP code, and it will be considered as a resource data type. Okay, it is not actually a data type, but we are using, or by mentioning the resource data type, we are just mentioning that it is a reference to something which is external to your PHP code. Okay, just like when you're connecting with the database using PHP, I'll show you how to connect it in my next video. Okay, so when you're connecting the database with your PHP code, what happens is the database is actually something which is external to your code, but you are creating a reference to that database. So that is considered as a resource. Okay, so that is all about various types of variables that you can have in PHP. We have discussed almost all the variables, all the types of variables. Next we'll move on to operators. So these are the basic operators that PHP support. You can have arithmetic operators, comparison operators, logical operators, or what do you say, the relational operators, assignment operators, conditional operators. Okay, so all these are various operators that PHP can support. So let's see all these in detail. I'll not be wasting much of my time here because most of them are exactly those operators which we have found in C programming language. So just like the arithmetic operators in C programming language, you can see that all of these are exactly those which we found in C programming language. So these are various arithmetic operators. These are various comparison operators. They are exactly similar as what we have in C programming language. So moving on, these are the logical operators that we have in PHP. We have AND, which is written AND, or we have OR, which is written OR, and you can have even the double ampersand AND operator, the logical AND operator, and the logical OR operator as well, which is supported in the C programming language. Then moving on, these are the various assignment statements that you can have in assignment operators that you can have in PHP. Then finally, this is the conditional operator. Again, this is having the same syntax as what we have in C programming language. You have a question mark followed by a colon. The question mark part will show the true part and the colon part will be showing the false part of it. So that is the conditional operator. Okay. So that's all about the operators in PHP. Let's move on to the control statements in PHP. So control statements can be conditional statements and looping statements. So conditional statements or decision making statements include what we have in the C programming language, like if else, nested if else, and so on. So this is the general flowchart for decision making statement. Let's move on. So you have three types: if else statement, else if statement, then switch statement. Okay, so the if else statement, as we know, if there is the condition, if the condition is true, you will execute some part of the code, else you will execute the other part of the code. Else if statement, which is saying that if there is a condition, you have to execute the true part of it, else you have to check for another condition. If it is okay, you will be executing that part of it, or you'll be having an else part, which is that part which is executed when both the conditions above it are violated. So the switch statement, this is used for reducing the lines of code when you have while using the if else or nested if else blocks. So this is just like you have in C, you have to use a separate cases, and you will have to find out which case actually the call stands for. So let's move. So this is the syntax for if else statement. So you have a condition, you have to specify the condition inside the parenthesis, and then you will have an else part. So this is an example. So example here, the example says that you will have to find out what is the day of this date. Of a particular date, what is the day? If it is a Sunday, you will have to say have a happy Sunday. If it is a Friday, you will have to say have a happy weekend. Or if it is any other weekdays, then you will have to say have a nice day. So this is just a code. Here you can see inside the PHP code, you have a variable which is of type date. Okay, so from the date you are finding out the day of it. That is why this capital letter D stands for. It stands for the day of this date. Okay, if it is a Friday, then you will say have a nice weekend. Else you will say have a nice day. Okay, this is for the if else statement. When it comes to the if else if statement, just like I said before, here you can see if it is a Friday, you will say a happy weekend. If it is a Sunday, you will have to say have a nice Sunday. Then if it is any other weekdays, then you will have to say have a nice day. So this is the example. There is an if condition, there is an else if condition, and an else part. You can have multiple else if conditions also. Okay, so if you want to go for all the weekdays, then you can go for multiple else if statements also. So that is about the else if statement of PHP. Next is about the switch statement. So this is the entire syntax for using a switch statement. You can see you will have an expression or a value that is being passed to the switch. Then you will have to write case for each cases. Okay, so case, what is the label of that case? Then case that will be terminated using a break statement. Then you have the second case with its own label, and so on. And for the default, just like you have in C programming, here also you have a default part for the switch. Okay, so for all the above cases are failed, in that case it will be executing the default case. Okay, and all the cases will be terminated using break. So that is an example. Then this is uh, a sample program. Here you can see we have given the parameter to the switch statement as $D, which is the day of this date. Okay, day of this date, and we are saying day 1. If it is day 1, in that case it will be displayed as day 1. Else if it is day 2, it will be displayed as day 2, and so on. If it is not being specified, if it is not analyzed or not falling in any of the labels mentioned, then the default will take place and it will be displaying echo I wonder which day. So that is about it. Is just a sample for using switch statement. Now let's move on to various looping statements that we have in PHP. So you will be familiar with the for loop, while loop, then do while loop, and so on, which we have in the C programming. So all these are applicable in PHP also. Uh, Beyond that, we have another loop which is called a for each loop. So we'll be discussing about all these. First, we'll have the for loop statement. So this is the syntax. You will have to use the for keyword. There should be an initialization part which is terminated using a semicolon. There should be a condition part which is again terminated using a semicolon, and the increment or decrement operators. Okay, so inside the braces, braces stands for block of code. Inside the braces, you will have to say what is the code to be executed. Then again, the while condition, it is also exactly the same as that we have in C programming language. You will have to specify the while keyword. Inside the parentheses, you will have to say the condition. Then inside the braces, enclosed inside the braces, you will have the code to be executed. Then this is the do while loop. So this is the exit control loop. Here you can see that you have the do keyword as well as the while keyword, and the condition is given at the end of the while statement, terminated with a semicolon. And inside the block of code will be specified enclosed with the braces. So that's all about the for loop, while loop, and do while loop. You can see examples for all these later. Okay. So next is the new one to the family, which is a for each loop. So for each loop is taking as input an array. Okay, so you are going to specify each array element one at a time. Okay, so for each, whatever is the array, that you will have to specify here, and you will have the block of code being specified within the enclosed braces. So that is about various statements in PHP. Then you can go to W3 Schools and you can find out various examples. There are multiple tutorials available for PHP, but I would like to prefer for W3 Schools because you have got an online editor there, so you can make your own programs and find out whether it is actually working. So I'll recommend you to use W3 Schools also. So you can go there and find out various practical exercises and learn the code for yourself. So theory part for all these have been come to an end. So today we have discussed about the operators, variables, and conditional statements that is available for PHP along with its most important characteristics. So I hope it was familiar, it was clear for you. So if you have any doubts, you can use my comment box. Thank you for your time.